rancher's boots sank into the cold earth as he made his way across the yard, each step crunching against the frost that clung to the ground like ghostly lace. The sun was low, burning orange across the endless Wyoming plains, casting long, lonely shadows over the fences and the worn barn. When he reached the porch, he hesitated. Inside that house, silence had taken up residence long ago. He opened the door anyway. The air inside smelled of dust and memory. The old house creaked as if it remembered laughter, but it had been years since it last heard it. In the far corner of the parlor sat the piano, Clara's piano. It was draped with a yellowed cloth and a thick layer of dust. Once it had been the heart of their evenings. He'd sit nearby, reading the newspaper or mending tack, while Clara filled the room with music that seemed to make the stars linger outside their window. Now that same piano looked like a grave. Henry took off his hat and ran a hand through his graying hair. The doctor's words from that morning still echoed in his head, heavy as stones. "She can't speak, Mr. Collins. She's been through something terrible. Her voice might never come back." In the small room down the hall, the girl sat quietly on the bed they'd set up for her. Emma, that's what the townsfolk called her, though she hadn't said it herself. She was only 9, maybe 10. Her blonde hair tangled, her eyes too old for her years. They'd found her wandering near the canyon a week ago, half-starved, clothes torn. She hadn't uttered a single word since. When they brought her to Henry's ranch, they said it was because she needed peace and distance. Maybe they also knew that Henry did too. He leaned against the doorway, watching her through the flickering lamplight. She sat on the edge of the bed, brushing the mane of his old mare through the open window where the horse had poked its head in, calm and patient. The sight stirred something in him. Emma's movements were gentle, slow, like someone afraid to break something fragile. She hummed under her breath, not with her voice, but through the rhythm of her motions, and for a fleeting second, she looked like Clara used to when she sang to calm the horses before storms. Henry swallowed hard and stepped away. He poured himself a little whiskey, the kind that burned going down and made his heart ache less. Outside, the night settled, the world quiet except for the faint creak of the windmill and the soft nicker of horses. He sat near the fire, staring at the piano in the corner. Its presence pulled at him like a voice from another life. He hadn't played a note since Clara died. He remembered her hands on those keys, slender, sure, alive. He remembered her smile, when she'd look over her shoulder at him and say, "Play it, Henry. Just once more." He'd always refused. He couldn't stand the sound of music without her laughter, but now the little girl in the next room haunted him even more. A child who wouldn't speak, wouldn't smile, wouldn't meet his eyes. The wind outside moaned against the windows and the house seemed to sigh. Henry looked down at his hands, the rough skin scarred from years of ranch work, and then back at the piano. Before he could talk himself out of it, he stood. The chair creaked as he pulled it out. Dust floated in the lamplight as he lifted the old cloth off the piano. His reflection stared back from the black wood, older, lonelier. He pressed one key. The sound was cracked, hesitant, but it still worked. He played another, then another. And before long the melody began to form, stumbling at first, then clearer. Clara's song, the one she used to play when thunder rolled or when they had nothing left but each other. Each note filled the empty room, wrapping around the walls, softening the years of silence. That's when he heard it. A faint sound behind him, like a breath catching. He turned, and there she was. Emma stood barefoot in the doorway, her small figure trembling, eyes wide and shining. Tears streaked her cheeks, her hands clasped together as if she were holding on to something invisible. Her lips parted, and though no words came, a fragile sound escaped. A hum. It was broken, trembling, but it carried the same tune he was playing. Henry's hands froze. His heart stumbled, then found its rhythm again. Slowly, gently, he continued, matching her trembling hum. The music wove between them, fragile as spun glass, something neither of them dared break. The fire crackled, the wind stilled, and in that small ranch house, silence gave way to something else. Hope, faint, but real. When the final note faded, Emma's eyes met his. She didn't speak, but she smiled, a small, uncertain thing that felt like the first sunrise after a long winter. And for the first time in years, Henry Collins felt that the house, the music, and maybe even his heart, were alive again. The mornings came softer after that night. The frost melted earlier, the wind lost some of its bite, and even the silence of the ranch seemed warmer. Henry found himself waking before dawn, not to feed the horses or check the fences, but to light the stove and make sure the fire was already burning when Emma came into the kitchen. She always appeared quietly, her hair still messy from sleep, her feet bare against the old wooden floor. She didn't speak, but she would smile now, a shy, fleeting thing, and he'd answer with a nod. That was their language. After breakfast, she'd follow him out to the barn, helping him carry small pails of grain or brushing the mare's coat. She worked carefully, always humming. Not quite words, just faint tones that drifted in the air like morning mist. Henry never asked her to speak. He didn't have to. The hum was enough to tell him she was healing. The piano became their evening ritual. At first, Henry told himself it was just to help her. But each night as he sat down and lifted the fallboard, it felt like Clara was in the room again. He could almost see her at the stove, humming the same song while she cooked, or laughing softly at his clumsy fingers missing the notes. Emma would sit cross-legged on the rug nearby, her hands clasped in her lap waiting for the first note. When he played, she would tilt her head, eyes half closed, listening as if every sound carried meaning. Days blurred into weeks. The girl began to change. The hollow look in her eyes softened, her cheeks flushed with color again. She started to mimic his movements, pressing one key, then two, then a full line of notes. Her fingers were small and hesitant, but she learned quickly. When she made a mistake, she would frown, puff her cheeks, and try again until she got it right. Henry couldn't help but smile. It had been years since anything had made him smile like that. One evening, a storm rolled in from the west. The wind howled through the cottonwoods, rattling the windows and driving the horses into restlessness. Henry shut the shutters and stoked the fire higher. Thunder cracked across the plains, and Emma jumped, dropping the wooden spoon she'd been using to stir soup. Her hands trembled. Her breath came fast, shallow, frightened. Henry crouched beside her and spoke softly. "It's just thunder, girl. It can't hurt you." But her eyes were distant, fixed on something far away that only she could see. She covered her ears, shaking her head. He didn't say anything more. Instead, he went to the piano. The wood was cool under his fingertips, the sound almost drowned by the rain pounding the roof. He pressed one key, then another. Slowly, the melody began. Clara's song, gentle as a whisper. Emma froze, her wide eyes darting toward him. The thunder rumbled again, but this time she didn't flinch. She watched his hands move across the keys, the music rising steady and sure. Her shoulders eased. Her small body stopped shaking. Henry didn't stop. He played through the storm, letting the sound of Clara's song fill every dark corner of the room. He could feel something shifting, something fragile, but powerful. Then he heard it. A voice. Barely a whisper at first, so soft he thought it was the wind. But then he realized it wasn't. Emma's lips were moving. Her voice was cracked, trembling, but real. "Don't stop," she said, her words stumbling out between sobs. "Please, don't stop playing." Henry froze mid-note. His breath caught in his chest. He turned, heart pounding, afraid to move, afraid the moment might vanish if he did. Her hands were clenched at her chest, her eyes wet with tears, but her mouth kept forming the words, desperate and true. He swallowed hard and forced himself to keep playing. The notes came shakier this time. His own tears made his vision blur, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The song flowed again, and she began to hum with it, then sing. Her voice cracked. With every few words, weak but beautiful, full of life clawing its way back from silence. When the storm finally began to fade, she was singing freely, her voice mingling with the last rolls of thunder. The firelight flickered over her face, and for the first time, she looked alive. Not just surviving, but living. The final note lingered in the air. She took a trembling breath and looked up at him. It was her song, she whispered, her voice thin but sure. The woman in the light. She told me to find you. Henry's hands went still over the keys. His throat tightened. He didn't need to ask who she meant. He just nodded, blinking away tears. Yeah, he murmured softly. That was Clara's song. Outside, the rain stopped. The clouds broke apart, and a pale silver light spilled through the window, touching the piano and the girl who sat beside it. The ranch was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This one was peaceful, full, alive. Emma leaned her head against his arm, her voice small but steady. Can you teach me to play it? Henry smiled, his heart aching and whole all at once. I reckon that's exactly what Clara would have wanted.